Okay, so today is Veterans Day. That's the nationally recognized holiday here in the United States, celebrated on November 11th, celebrating any man or woman who has served in the armed forces here in the country. It's also recognized in other countries with varying names to celebrate the end of World War One. So today is a big day around the world. In case you're not sure of the difference, Veterans Day is specifically to honor those who are veterans of the armed forces. So somebody who is currently serving or somebody who has finished serving, those would be the people you're honoring today, where Memorial Day is honoring those who lost their lives in service and are no longer with us. That's why a lot of Memorial Day services and traditions are held at cemeteries. Here in America, Veterans Day actually started off with a whole different name. In 1919, on November 11th, Woodrow Wilson was the first president to recognize an Armistice Day. That's kind of a worldwide day known for honoring those who have lost their lives during war times. What I really loved about Woodrow Wilson's speech to the public on November 11th that evening, in regards to why Armistice Day was needed in this country, is that he was saying that it does both honor and celebrate the men who died to free us from the tyranny. On the flip side, it also gives us the opportunity to show other countries that here in America, we believe in peace and justice to the councils of other nations, and that was in the speech, and I just feel like that resonates with me in such a different way than how I feel Veterans Day today in 2015 resonates with me, and I just kind of wanted to get a dialogue going about what this holiday is, what it represents, and how we view it. In 1945, a man named Raymond Weeks from Birmingham, Alabama, he suggested to Dwight D. Eisenhower that this day should include all veterans spanning the scope of service here in the country, not just the ones who lost their lives in World War I. So, Eisenhower thought this was a brilliant idea. Elizabeth Dole later actually dubbed Raymond Weeks the father of Veterans Day, which is kind of cool because he was the one that really petitioned to get this thing going. Now, I'm all for national holidays, and anything that gets you off work and able to enjoy time with your family, A+. However, every year that certain holidays go by, and then you hear facts about opposing views, it starts to sink in like, wait, do we really celebrate veterans on Veterans Day? If we really look at it, is that what we're doing? Or are some of these holidays like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Martin Luther King Day, they just ways for us to get mini vacations? Like, do all of us promote the idea of some of these holidays just to keep them going because we benefit personally from them? Or is it because we feel so intrinsically intertwined with these holidays because they're a part of the fabric of our past as Americans? There's such a difference in those answers, and sometimes when I talk to people about things like this, my viewpoint can get skewed, so I'm trying very carefully to keep this as clear as possible. In 2015, when you see statistics about how much money we're spending on an industrial war complex, and then how little we're spending on making sure our veterans are taken care of, it starts to make you wonder, are holidays like this actually celebrating Veterans Day? Or is this just kind of a brainwashing tactic that the government uses to make sure that the public still knows that if you live in America, you need to support your troops and bleed red, white, and blue, or you have to get out? But if you question, hey, I do support the troops, but our government doesn't seem to, then you look like you're anti the troops, because they have a way of spinning it to make it look like, hey, we're America, we're pro-troops, we're pro-guns, we're pro-war. But then, when you look at how we're taking care of people who believed into that idea and now are facing the aftermath of it, we're not taking care of them. I was reading some startling facts on VA hospitals and VA medical funding that's being slashed by the billions, and it doesn't make sense to me that we're sitting here celebrating today by not going to work, sleeping in a little later, going shopping. It doesn't really make that much sense because we're so removed from what this actually was. I know I'm not the only one who's sitting at their computer, surfing the internet, and whoops, all of a sudden you come along a trending topic and you click on it and you go in and you see two sides completely battling it out. Well, let's face it, it's always like 2 or 3 people, but basically battling it out, and both having really interesting points to bring up about their side. Now, I do want to make something clear. Everything that I read that was not as strongly in support of Veterans Day was never anti-veteran. I have not come across anyone anti-veteran, and I want to make that point very clear. I think when you're talking about a subject that is this emotionally backed, you need to make sure you're clear. And I want it to be clear that I'm not anti-anyone. This video is not anti-anyone, okay? It's just to get thoughts going, conversation fluid, like, it's just to get things moving forward. And a lot of facts that are being brought up by the opposing side make sense. Like the person who said Veterans Day now is honoring and celebrating people who joined the armed services and were not killed, but went in there knowing that they may have to kill or they may be killed. And that person's question said, why not just not join? Why not just not join? Now, you could say about 40 to 50 years ago, well, that wasn't exactly an option. There was the draft. Yes, however, you do still have a choice. You weren't thrown into the war. You were drafted. Then you had to make your choice. Do you join the war? Do you leave the country and get looked at as a pacifist, a hippie, a flower child, a yellow belly coward, like whatever you want to call them, whatever, call them your name, at least they have their life, or 3, you go to jail. Now, none of those options sound that amazing to me. If I would have been stuck being a young man in 1942 having to make a decision like that, I wouldn't have had an easy time. However, there are choices, and that's all this person is saying. It's not something where you're pushed into it and you have to die. That's not what's happening here. These are choices that men and women are making, and the person just wanted to bring up, hey, I get that we're celebrating soldiers who went into war. However, there was the option for them not to go into war. What about talking about that and figuring out what exactly about Veterans Day are we celebrating? So I found this little gem of George W. Bush in the 2000 preliminaries being asked by Tom Brokaw, who, if any, do you see as a political philosopher or thinker that you can relate with? And George W. Bush's answer simply was Jesus, because he changed his heart. Now, in my mind, thinking what that would mean coming from a presidential candidate is that they're going to start to look at things from a different perspective. They're going to start seeing things from a more compassionate eye, and they're going to work with countries more willfully rather than be so abrupt and defensive. So I'm a little confused after reading that being his answer and then looking up his statistics being one of the most warmongering presidents we've ever had. And that's the argument that I never quite understand from those people. The George W. Bush argument. Jesus Christ is my homeboy. Rap. What? Hashtag? I don't get it. Like, it's just really confusing to me, because if you really were pro-JC, then you would be pro-pacifist. Then war wouldn't make sense to you. 250 million Christians that live in this country, or the 100 million born-again Christians, would probably voice a concern as to why war isn't needed, because the words of Jesus Christ tell us that we don't have to war. And how come that isn't happening? How come Christians aren't saying, hey, this is not Christian-like? We should be helping and taking care of the people in these other countries. Because that's the part where it falls short. That's the part where I get really upset. These are other countries. This isn't like we're having a war on a video game. This isn't a war that's made up. These are other people's lives. I don't like standing behind somebody murdering a bunch of innocent civilians or murdering a bunch of other brainwashed soldiers just because you're wearing an American flag on your chest. Like, that doesn't make me feel comfortable. That doesn't make me feel patriotic. I don't feel good about that decision. In fact, I feel a lot like some loser kid in high school who's standing on the sidelines watching the bully jock beat up a nerd. I feel like I'm literally just sitting on the sidelines saying, this feels weird, but if you say something, the bully's gonna come after me. Like, it's fear. Like, it's really just fear that keeps the meat-headed, beer-chugging men in trailer parks yelling, rah, 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 kill, 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 instead of saying, hey, why are we doing this? And the thing that's most confusing to me is when you sit and have a conversation with anyone who is pro-war, whether it's a veteran, whether it's just your NFL junkie, or whether it's a family member. The hardest part about taking a stance anti-war is coming off anti-veteran. And I don't want to come off anti-veteran. I don't want to come off anti-human. That's kind of my point. My point is, I want veterans to be able to stay home and cherish the time they have with their little kids and their wives and their husbands and their lives. I want people to have the opportunity to not have to sacrifice their life because they've been brainwashed to think they're protecting everybody else in this country. Nobody else in this country is more free. In fact, we're less free. And that's just factual. You can look it up. There are groups of veterans online creating a voice for people to say, hey, you know what? These wars haven't progressed us. These wars have thrown us back into dark ages. These wars have divided us because of skin color, because of religion, because of sexual orientation. And we don't have to stand by these. We don't have to support our troops just because they're wearing red, white, and blue. Many countries are supported by red, white, and blue. Many flags have red, white, and blue. I don't know why I have to stand by a country that just wants to go and invade and kill. Why can't we just work it out? Why can't we have a giant poker match? Why can't we talk amongst a table and get some beer and some cheese and everybody brings the food of their nation and we talk and we laugh? Why do things always have to be mean? Why? Like, why do I have to support people who want to go and beat people up? Why do I have to support people who want to go and kill and shoot and take out anger that they have from here back home on others? Why do I have to watch on the news people running for their lives in other countries just because they weren't fortunate enough to be born in LA or Philly or New York? That's not fair. And then, God, if I was in those countries, I'd want some kid on their fucking computer getting on YouTube and saying, I'm not this. Don't think this is America. We want to work with you. We love you. There's really no other message that needs to be given other than this is a country where you can be yourself. You can be yourself and you can love and you can practice the religion you want. You can love who you want and you can speak how you want. And that's the beauty of this country. And what's really frustrating is the people who are joining the armed services are trying to defend just that. They're trying to defend those freedoms. And yet, those same freedoms, when used to say things that don't sit well with people in power, or people who have money, or people who love war, because they financially gain from those situations, those are the people who can't even sit down and have an adult conversation without mudslinging to get across their point. It just doesn't make sense to me. You take somebody who is pro-war and anti that flower child mentality and sit them down and try to have an adult conversation with them and see who goes irrational first. I've been in this place a lot of times. Again, I want everybody to know I am pro-people. I'm pro-people. I want everybody to succeed and do well and achieve their dream. And war, not doing it. I'm so anti-war. I'm so disgusted by growing up in a culture of war. I know that I'll get called names. I'm aware. I know that taking a stance anti-war in a country that is so pro-war that we spend more money on war than anything else we spend money on combined, that if we took away some of the money that we spent on our war industrial complex because we're deceived by our politicians, that we could in fact clear up the streets, get homeless shelter, make sure the world is fed. It's just really kind of frustrating when you live in a country where you have a surplus of money and a surplus of food, and yet you hear every day that you're in a deficit and that there's not food for the world. Those aren't true. The deficit's made up. We owe $14 trillion to who? Giant question mark, can you appear behind me? It doesn't make sense. Like, who? Who? And Honestly, why not just start over? Who's the person standing in the way of just starting over? Like, why not?